Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum bum bum. Where's my music? Give back the music. There's the music. Let me check my levels. Can I be heard? Yes, I can. Can I do this? I can. Excellent. Whew, what a day. Hello, everyone. I am an old bear. And you can call me Bread, or you can call me Bear, or you can call me over to your campsite and I'll have a free meal. I'm fine with any of those. Just don't fail to call me for free food. That seems absurdly loud. Anyway, if you're new here, my week daily schedule is usually to read one of the two stories that we are currently working our way through. Today's story is Immortality Starts with Generosity, about Chen Haoren, a young man who has been transmigrated into the body of a villain and erased the villain. He doesn't have any memories of them. Very sad for the villain, I suppose. But he can't remember, he doesn't exist anymore, so it's not like he can be sad. Anyway, let's just hop right in, shall we? Last time we saw Chen Haoren, he was getting into a big fight in a public arena for a massive reward for anyone who could kick his ass. Oh, I'm sorry. Kick it. This was bait, of course, to draw out a member of the Lan family who was using either the original cultivation method of the Lan family, which was apparently a profound rank, or to draw out the ones who were using the new method, which is an earth rank, which was supposed to be a Lan family secret, but Lan Yao gave it away when she punched Chen Haoren while he was having dinner once. He succeeded in baiting out Lan Junjie, who is Lan Yao's brother, and was still using the profound rank cultivation method. And after a bit of a scuffle, he. Why is my mouth like that? After a bit of a scuffle, he managed to reveal the rank of his own cultivation and declare that Lan Yao was using one of the same rank, that being Earth rank cultivation. As expected, this upset things in the city a little bit, with local groups immediately setting out to find out if the Lan family did have a new cultivation method of a higher rank, and also inflicting upon Chen Haoren the greatest of all terrible events, a need to socialize with large groups of people. Oh, thank you, Itsutai. Charlie's doing better. I like these glasses. I got them from a camper over the weekend. He was quite insistent that I have them. He kept saying, "Forget the glasses, just go, run away, let the bear have them." And so now I have these nice shades. He was a very polite man, so I let him get away. I was just reviewing what happened last time on Immortality Starts with Generosity, and how, after revealing his cultivation rank to everyone in the city, he was now inflicted with the most dramatic event that a poor person can go to: socializing with other people. He had to confirm and spread the rumor that the Lan family had that earth rank cultivation method after all. Oh, and Song Yuelin had to kill a Liquid Meridian Realm cultivator who tried to break in and steal Chen Haoren's cultivation method book. That was sort of a footnote, but I thought it was great. Protecting your territory is always a good thing to do in my book. My book is the bear book. The bear book of being a bear. I don't know the ISBN number or I'd share it with you. Anyway, the amount of pressure brought onto the Lan family by the scrutiny of other families and groups in the city was sufficient to allow Lan Fen to declare open season on them. And so she brought Chen Haoren on her first night raid of the Lan family's resources. I believe it was a medicinal garden. She declared that she would be taking care of the stronger Chi realms in the area and that she would be asking Chen Haoren to kill the rest. It was at this point that Chen Haoren declared that no, he would not be doing that. While he was willing to help with her going out and murdering her entire family, he wasn't actually willing to become a murderer for hire, which is a strange line to draw, but he did. Apparently, it had something to do with his history on Earth, which I'm keen to find out more about. What if the reason he transmigrated is because I ate him? Wouldn't that be something? Anyway, Chen Howard didn't get invited along to the night raids after that. Also, Lanfen was upset with him. But women always get upset with you when you do something they don't like. You kill one cub and suddenly they're like, no, I don't want to mate with you. I'm sorry, I'll stop emphasizing the infanticide in my life. Let's see. Anyway, having realized that he was being a terrible person, Chen Howard immediately set about paying reparations to the people that whoever had occupied his body before had wronged. This included giving Lan Fen a set of papers that would allow her to annul their marriage whenever she felt like. He was somewhat surprised when she didn't immediately turn them in, though. Though Lan Fen grew somewhat colder after he refused to kill people for her, she did at least fulfill her debts as she saw them by giving him the resources he needed to ascend to the 7th layer of the Chi realm. Or was it the 8th? I've lost track. I'm sure he'll tell us eventually. And she's also dedicated to showing him how to harmonize with the Kenyan carving sword, something he's made some small progress in. But that's about all that happened last week. Let's just jump right in, shall we? Chapter 41. This young master tries to eat. Oh, I forgot. They went on a market buying trip to buy random things. It felt sort of like a date. And then Lan Fen invited him to eat. And that's where we're starting now. The Wine Springs Inn was a decent tavern that did decent business. It was one that Jen Howard was both familiar and unfamiliar with. During his gold spending spree, he had visited most other popular dining establishments save this one. The reason being that it was a Lan family property and brazenly bribing their customers was too bold even for them. At least, it was at the time. Chen Haoren kicked open the doors of the establishment. The doors, of remarkable quality, swung open and crashed into the walls rather than fly off their hinges. I've always wanted to do that, he cheerfully said. The interior of the tavern was smaller than that of the drunken immortal pavilion, but it was still a respectable size. The dining area only extended to the first floor, with the second floor housing guest rooms. Already they were attracting attention from the filled tavern. Chen Haoren heard some shouts of recognition toward him, and a few even raised their cups, perhaps thinking he was there to pick up their tab. A pale-faced server rushed over. "Welcome to the Wine Springs Inn, sir." The poor fellow didn't sound too happy to see him. "Table for two, please." Chen Haoren smiled. The server briefly looked confused until Lan Fen walked in behind him. The man became several shades paler upon seeing her. She flexed her chi, revealing her 5 layers of cultivation. Her presence crackled out like lightning over the dining floor. Whatever the server was going to say caught in his throat, and he silently escorted them to a far table. Oh, oh dear, I should have gotten a nap in. Hmm. Far table. Lan Fen stopped short and pointed to one in the tavern's center. "I want that table," she imperiously declared. The group of men who had been in the middle of their meal looked at her slack-jawed. The server nervously twitched. "My apologies, Miss Fen. That table is occupied." Chen Howard strode over and dropped the sack of tails onto the table. "Gentlemen," he said, "let me pay for your drinks." "By all means," one said, shooting up and offering his chair. He immediately grabbed the bag and left, followed by the boisterous scrambling of his companions. "Clear this," Chen Howard ordered the server. "Yes, sir." As he rushed to move the plates, Chen Howard tossed him a tael. "For your troubles," he said, winking at the man. The server bowed and rushed off. "That was a bit counter for our purpose to coming here," Lan Fen said. "You should always tip the help." Chen Howard cheerfully replied. It was his solidarity as a former service worker. Even across worlds, the industry just sucked all the same. "Do you not think it wasteful? That money could be put to better use." "I have plenty of money. Helping out someone barely affects me." "Is that what this is about, then? Helping people?" "I'm in a position where I could change someone's life with just a minuscule effort on my part. If I don't do it when it's easy for me, when will I?" "There are many who would never do it at all." "More power to them." Chen Howard leaned back on his chair. There was a purpose to these questions. "Is this about what happened that night?" "You will not survive long with that attitude." Why do I keep yawning? It's very odd. My apologies. I'm not going around picking fights that okay, let me try this again. You will not survive long with that attitude. I think not going around picking fights raises my odds of survival in the long term. Not if you leave a trail of living enemies behind you. Chen Howard rubbed the bridge of his nose. There was clearly a disconnect between the two of them on the issue. Trying to explain himself would no doubt be an exhausting and futile effort. "I'm not about to have a whole discussion about this in enemy territory, Landfed," he said. "Besides, I'm sure the big fish will show up soon. We should table this for later." "Are you perhaps talking about me?" called a voice from behind. Chen Howard looked to find a tanned, black-haired youth walking over and seating himself at their table. "Oh, yes, I got this." He was dressed simply with no unnecessary frills or patterns. Across both arms wound black bones and shaped into rings, matching the bone choker around his neck. Chen Howard reached out with his sense. "Eighth layer." "Who the fuck are you?" Chen Howard asked, bewildered. "Xie Jin," he smiled. "Pleasure to make your acquaintance." Chen Howard looked at Lan Fen, but she shook her head. "And the reason you're here?" he asked Xie Jin. "I am a man who loves making new friends wherever he goes," he proudly said. "And your actual reason?" Lan Fen sharply demanded. Xie Jin seemed to deflate and smiled embarrassedly. I heard you typically pay for people's food and drinks, so I came to try my luck. His stomach, as if to punctuate his statement, growled. Chen Howard considered the sheepish man. It probably wouldn't be so bad to humor him. He needed to meet new people anyway. He waved the server over. Is there anything you can't eat? Xie Jin lit up with a bright smile. I have yet to find anything in this world that I can't. We'll have all the pork dishes you got then, Chen Howard said to the server. Pork? Lan Fen raised an eyebrow. Your fault, he accused her. I'll never be the same again. Then I will join you in your quest, brother Chen, Xie Jin cheered. Who the hell's your brother? Despite clearly being here with ulterior motives, the staff still served them quickly. Chen Howard had to admire their professionalism. He was going to feel a bit bad about causing a scene here. Xie Jin tore into the food with a gusto that only the starving could have. Ugh. Chen Howard followed suit because he hated pork. Lan Fen was surprisingly not that much of a better of an eater, more like a soldier than a proper noble lady. How come a guy like you hasn't eaten? Chen Howard asked between mouthfuls. Is an eighth layer really that poor? Deep in his own plate, Xie Jin mumbled something unintelligible before swallowing. I spent all my money to travel here for the palace exams, he said, beating his chest. Do they not have them in the southern region? They're about as common there as they are here. I just felt my odds of getting in were higher if I came to Clear Springs, Xie Jin sighed. Between you and Lan Yao, though, I'm not liking my odds. Chen Haoren snorted. He was worried about the wrong people. By the way, Xie Jin leaned in and whispered, is there a reason everybody seems to be talking about your lady friend here? It was true. The other diners were either openly staring or else stealing glances at Lan Fen, and all of them were talking about it. It made sense. The Lan family owned the place. The people who regularly patronized it would recognize her on sight. Coming here was definitely a much better idea than going to the Drunken Immortal Pavilion. They talk like that because I have returned from the dead, Lan Fen idly answered. Xie Jin looked at him, and Chen Haoren shrugged his shoulders in lieu of a response. Right, he trailed off. Will you also be participating in the palace exams? I will be taking first place, yes. Xie Jin's smile turned sharp. That's a bold statement to make in front of me. I don't even think you're on the betting lists. There's betting? Chen Haoren asked in disbelief. For an entrance exam? Of course, people are eager to speculate who will take first, Xie Jin smirked. And not to brag, but I have some decent odds myself. Didn't you just come here, though? Chen Haoren questioned. How could people know who you are? I've been fighting in the arena since I got here. Your fight that day actually took all the attention away from mine. You've got a lot of odds in your favor, actually. Did he? When did he even say he would participate? I'm not participating, Chen Haoren said. Why not? Xie Jin asked him, startled. He glanced at Lan Fen. My path doesn't lead there. Chen, Lan Fen began, but was interrupted by Xie Jin jumping up from his seat. What bold words, brother Chen! You are a man of the world, aren't you? When the hell did I become your brother? Let me pour you a drink, Xie Jin cheered. The doors slammed open once again, startling Xie Jin mid-pour and causing him to spill alcohol over Chen Haoren's hand. Four Lam family members rushed in, looking around until their server from before pointed out their table. The leader of the group, a white-haired girl of the seventh layer, stepped forward in disbelief. Lan Fen? I'm sorry, that wasn't right. Lan Fen? That was closer. Before she could step forward, an alcohol bottle soared over and broke against her head. Her head snapped back, blood running from her forehead. How dare you embarrass me in front of my brother? Xie Jin roared. Chen Haoren sighed. He supposed this was one way to escalate. And chapter 41. I like this Xie Jin fellow. He's very direct. He's, what's the word? Bearish? Boorish? Something like that. I think he'll go far in life. Chapter 42. This young master's first bar fight. The Latin scions were none too pleased with Xie Jin's pitching. Bastard! You dare! The land girl at the helm stopped them from rushing over. She held a hand to her bleeding head and glared at Xie Jin. Who are you? Chen Haoren saw her flicker eyes toward him as she asked. Are you worried now? You should have thought about your actions before making me look bad in front of Brother Chen, Xie Jin said, puffing up his chest. Sister Jia, don't listen to this idiot, said a boy behind her, also seventh layer. He's Xie Jin. So you've heard of me, Xie Jin laughed. He turned to Chen Haoren. I told you I was well known. Have you already forgotten how I beat you last time? Growled the land boy. You'll pay for harming Sister Jia. You're the fool who lost every fight he's been in, Lan Jia said in realization. Chen Haoren raised an eyebrow. The way Xie Jin was gassing himself up earlier, combined with his cultivation layer, he thought he was some hotshot. Are you telling me you're full of shit? Xie Jin awkwardly laughed. Lan Jia looked even angrier now. I'll deal with you later, she said with a dangerous finality in her tone. Are you implying that you'll be dealing with me now? Lan Fen said, walking forward. Chen Haoren laughed at how quickly they went from roaring tigers to hissing cats in front of Lan Fen. He couldn't fault them, no. Just knowing her for a few months left an impression on him, let alone spending years around her. Lan Fen, Lan Jia said, eyeing her warily. So it really is you. You have not answered me, Lan Jia. Lan Fen, ignoring how they tensed, casually walked up to Lan Jia and locked our eyes with her. Lan Jia held her gaze for a moment in a valiant attempt at confidence, but inevitably turned her eyes away. What are you doing here, Lan Fen? I am here to enjoy a meal before the palace exams, of course. Lan Jia's face twisted in hideous joy. Chen Haoren could already hear what she would say next. Lan Fen did as well. She flexed her chi once more, and Lan Jia's words died in her mouth. You, spluttered wide-eyed Lan Jia. Whatever confidence she and her posse came in with, though thoroughly died under the weight of Lan Fen's chi. Yes, Lan Fen drawled. Yes, Lan Jia, Xie Jin crowed. Sister Fen here will be taking first place in the exams. Have you come to congratulate her as well? He sounded well-meaning, but the shit-eating grin on his face said otherwise. Chen Haoren had to give it to him, though. He was quick on the uptake. The situation in the tavern descended into silence. All eyes were on Lan Jia, and the weight of them seemed to press down on her. She gritted her teeth, and her face burned with incandescent rage. For a brief moment, he thought she would fight back. Lan Fen regarded her with a steely-eyed look. Lan Jia's mind, or spine, got the better of her, and she looked down. Congratulations, she muttered, the word sounding like it was unwillingly pulled from her very being. Lan Fen was scarier than he thought. Chen Haoren idly toweled off his wet hand and wondered what Lan Jia's experience with her was. Lan Fen, for her part, looked disappointed that Lan Jia decided to bend. So this is how you learn to use your head. She directed a sharp eye at the rest of the Lan family members.
And do you have anything to add?
They were in various states of disbelief seeing Lan Jia's actions, but after hearing Lan Fen, they too looked down and weakly offered well wishes. Chen Haoren sighed. He had prepared a whole script of what to say, and it was all useless now.
Little Junjie, is that you?
Lan Fen unexpectedly said. He looked over, and indeed Lan Junjie was peeking around the side of the doors. He froze when Lan Fen exposed him. Lan Jia whirled around with wide eyes.
You fool!
She looked ready to go over and beat him, but Lan Fen was already moving to the doors. Lan Jinjie, finally realizing the trouble he was in, tried to duck away, but Lan Fan reached out her hand like a steel claw and gripped his collar. She pulled him fully into view, his face still bandaged from the beating Chen Howard had given him in the arena.
It is you, Lan Fan cooed. How long has it been?
She asked as if she were catching up with an old acquaintance.
Hello, Lan Fan.
Lan Jinjie stuttered, acting markedly more well-behaved than Chen Howard had ever seen him.
You've gotten more handsome in the time I have not seen you, little Junjie.
Lan Fan's voice was unnaturally saccharine sweet.
How disgusting.
She slapped Lan Jie full across the face with her free hand.
What?
Before Lan Junjie could finish, Lan Fen backhanded him, then repeated this motion again. Lan Junjie reached out to grab her arm, but she deftly avoided his grasp and slapped him. He clawed at the arm holding his collar to no avail, and she slapped him. He uselessly kicked her, and she slapped him. His hands glowed green with the scattering petal palm. She slapped the chi out of them before he could finish the technique, and slapped him. Back and forth Lan Fen's hand went, and Lan Junjie's head went back and forth with it.
Lan Fan, enough!
Lan Jia roared. Lan Fen ignored her and continued slapping Lan Junjie. Lan Jia seethed and green light rose in her hands. Her lackeys bristled. An alcohol bottle went soaring through the air and smashed in the back of her head.
Forgetting someone,
Xie Jin said, casually bouncing another wine bottle in his hand. Chen Haoren rose from his feet and flared his chi.
Lan family,
He roared. He slammed his fist through the table and split it in two.
Twice now you have interfered with my meals. Can a man not eat in peace?
It was bullshit, of course, considering that they came here to start trouble, but he only had a carriage ride to come up with lines. He kicked one half of the table and sent it hurtling towards Lan Jia. She smashed it into splinters with her palm and sneered at Chen Haoren. Xie Jin, using the table to disguise his approach, swung his wine bottle and broke it over her head. Chen Haoren let out a low whistle, both at Xie Jin's quick thinking and Lan Jia's remarkably tough head. Xie Jin looked over with a smile.
I'll take care of this one, brother Chit.
The seventh player land boy caught him in the side with a flying kick and sent Xie Jin crashing into another table, scattering its occupants. Chen Haoren grasped the remaining half of the broken table and, wielding it like a club, leapt forward. The land boy cursed and raised his arms to block. Lan Jie pulled him back and stepped forward and threw Chen Haoren's impromptu weapon with a scattering petal palm, breaking the table to pieces and landing 6 heavy blows to his head. Chen Haoren rolled back with the force and blinked stars and sawdust out of his eyes. Lan Jia was better with that technique than Lan Junjie was, for sure. Throughout the whole exchange, Lan Fen continued slapping Lan Junjie. His indignant protests devolved into squealing sobs as Lan Fen slapped his face bloody.
Lan Fan, your opponent is me,
Lan Jia shouted. Blood ran down her head in rivulets, turning her furious face into something demonic. She motioned her with her head toward Chen Haoren.
Deal with him.
The other 3 Lans surrounded Chen Haoren while Lan Jia rushed at Lan Fen. Xie Jie swept her feet out from under her in a sliding tackle. She fell heavily to the floor, and he grappled with her in a tangle of limbs. Chen Haoren huffed a laugh.
Not sending your best, huh? We could say the same for you,
The land boy replied. Shen Haoren frowned with a cry of when a cry of shock came from Xie Jin. Lan Jia stood up, and Xie Jin, still wrapped around her, was effortlessly lifted with her. She slammed the back of her fist into his head and dropped him. Chen Haoren sighed. He charged at the land boy, and the other two closed in on his sides. The land boy lashed out with a straight punch to his chest. Chen Haoren caught it full on and barreled into him, sending them both down to the floor. He pinned the land boy's arms with his knees and punched his face with one chi-enhanced blow after the other. The two lands he ignored punched and kicked him, but he ignored them and kept beating. When they finally pried him off of the land boy was properly dazed. Chen Haoren buried his elbow into the guts of the one, then brought it up to catch his chin in a brutal uppercut. The other brought up his knee into Chen Haoren's own gut in revenge, but it didn't even wind him. Chen Haoren grabbed the offending knee and flipped the land onto the ground. A chi-enhanced kick sent him skidding into a nearby table. Chen Haoren dusted off his clothes. Despite taking so many hits, he was perfectly fine, a combination of blessing of his superior cultivation and the Stygian lotus. It was good to be the stronger cultivator for once. He turned to help Xie Jin, only to find him standing over the fallen form of Lan Jia, her eyes rolling into the back of her head. In the time when Chen Haoren wasn't paying attention, he had somehow gotten the better of her. It didn't look like she'd made it easy, though. Xie Jin had a nasty yellow bruise forming on his cheek, and his robes were scuffed and torn. He looked triumphant, though.
Don't you ever forget who humbled you today, he spat.
Good work, Chen Haoren said. Xie Jin smiled.
It was nothing, Brother Chen.
As you say, Brother Jin. Xie Jin brightened with joy. There was a thump at the doors. Lan Fan had let go of Lan Junjie, and he fell to the floor, his face swollen and red. She crouched over him.
Tell Lan Yao I will be waiting for her at the palace exams.
She looked over her shoulder at Chen Haoren.
Shall we go?
End chapter 42. That was fun. I definitely liked Xie Jin. I hope he gets better at fighting, because he seems pretty bad at it. You've got to be good at fighting to live. Chapter 43. This young master arrives at the exams. It had been quite quiet ever since they picked a fight at the Lan family's tavern. Not that things were quiet on the Lan family's end, but Lan Fen at least stuck to the matter and prepared herself, advancing to the 6th layer ahead of the exam. Chen Haoren continued to train in harmonization, bits of connection coming in fits and spurts. It was more progress than he had previously made, and he was satisfied with it. He was beginning to see why Lan Fen had said higher ring techniques had more to harmonize with. While he didn't have a technique weak enough to compare, these brief bits of harmony he achieved with the canyon carving sword revealed something far larger than him in essence. Cultivation-wise, he saw just about as much progress. It wasn't just his low-grade spirit roots slowing him down. It was his cultivation method as well. It was obvious in hindsight, but higher quality chi took more effort to create than the chi of a lower rank technique. It explained why his predecessor only had a profound rank method, despite coming from such a powerful family. If he wanted to advance at a reasonable pace, he had to practice a method easier on his spirit roots. Not that his predecessor seemed interested in practicing at all. It had taken stacking enhanced meridians, the cheek pools cleansing, and the high rank elixirs he'd been eating to create his own previously quick cultivation pace, despite the obstacles holding him back. The advantages would wane, however, as he advanced further and the gaps between layers became wider. Not that Chen Haoren would think of giving up the Yellow Dragon River refinement. He had benefited too much from it to switch at this point. He had to admit, though, the thought of advancing quickly, perhaps even to the Liquid Meridian realm, was a tempting one. He had to find more treasures that enhanced cultivation speed, though that was easier said than done. Chen Howard had to admit that the ones he did have were chanced more upon more by luck than anything else. Lacking results in his harmonization and cultivation training, he focused on combat instead, much to Song Yue Lin's sadistic delight. While he took inordinate joy in slapping Chen Haoren around the training field, he had a killer's eye for errors and was quick to correct every flaw. Xie Jin also had hung around. Chen Haoren took daily trips out of the manor to make sure he was fed and that the Lan family hadn't shanked him and left him dead in a ditch somewhere. It was the least he could do for someone who so readily fought with him and Xie Jin, and with him and Lan Fan. Shen Jin was pleasant if violently inclined to be around. Xie Jin was a man of simple pleasures. He liked eating and winning, and as it turned out, could scarcely afford both. It had come to a surprise to Chen Haoren that Xie Jin's reputation for losing had not been an exaggeration. He had yet to see him win a single bout in the arenas. It was up to the point that he was surprised Xie Jin was able to beat Lan Jia at all. He had to have some card up his sleeve at least. For all that he was quick to pick a fight, Xie Jin didn't strike him as the restless type. Or perhaps that impression was from the sheer confidence Xie Jin radiated, even if it was undue. Chen Haoren wished him luck with the palace exams nevertheless. After all, they wouldn't go as expected. The day of the palace exams was like any other, sunny and warm, with just a bit of humidity in the air. The exam site was to be held deep within Clear Springs Mountains, the exact location only being released the day before. It was apparently standard procedure to have the exams in wilderness areas where examinees would have to stay up for up to 3 days. It sounded more like a survival course than a test to select future government officials, but considering what the city lord was dealing with in Clear Spring City, it was perhaps relevant. They set off early in the morning as a group. Xie Jin had been invited to go with them, and Song Yue Lin would of course never miss out. With Lan Fan and Song Yue Lin around, it was guaranteed that nothing bad would happen to them on the way to the exam site. They did have to scare off a few of the braver monsters, though. Song Yuelin just had to release his chi for them to take the hint, but being the bastard that he was, he let the beasts get dangerously close before he drove them off. Chen Haoren was thankful they didn't run into any liquid meridian realm monsters like the last time he'd traveled this deep into the mountains. He did wonder how other cultivators handled traveling to the exam site. He got his answer when they passed a group of cultivators 100 strong. This group was organized a while ago to travel to the exam site together, Xiejin explained after they went around the mass. It's easier to ward off potential attacks and conserve energy with greater numbers. If you didn't invite me, I would have been troubling with them. There were 3 different types of groups traveling to the exam. The first were protected by the more powerful cultivators like Chen Haoren's group. The next were cultivators who decided their own strength was enough to guarantee their safety. Whether or not they reached the exam site would prove the accuracy of their assumptions. The last were large groups like the one they just passed that relied on getting as many bodies together as possible. This type typically consisted of cultivators of a lower background who didn't have more experienced family members to escort them. Chen Haoren stole a few glances back at the group. The fact that they had to resort to this just to travel to take a test was crazy. Song Yue Lin saw him looking back. This could be considered the first test of the exam, he said. Seeing that he had all their attention, he continued. If a test taker can't even reach the exam area, then naturally the palace school won't be interested in them. It made a twisted sort of sense, if one that he didn't agree with. That sounds ripe for abuse, Chen Haoren said. Indeed it is, Song Yuelin agreed. Disputes are common. His statement was punctuated by an explosion behind them. Like that, he smiled. So long as it isn't taken too far, the exam official will typically ignore it. What are the odds of us being ambushed by the Lan family, then? Chen Haoren asked. He glanced at Lan Fen. She held his gaze with a calm look, and he let himself relax. With her sensing skills, they'd know ahead of time. If she was still calm, then there was nothing to worry about.
I certainly hope they ambush us,
Song Yuelin chirped. They left the sound of fighting behind them, and before long a large wooden pavilion came into view. Just one of the many things the city lord prepared in advance for the exam official. He was also responsible for cordoning off the exam site and preparing whatever specific ideas they had for the exam itself. It was honestly no wonder that the city lord was so obsessed with making sure the exams went off without a hitch. A crowd of earlier arrivals had already formed around the pavilion, and more poured in from various directions. Some casually followed their elders, others arrived in various states of disarray, having had poor luck in the mountains. Chen Haoren frowned. He wouldn't be surprised if some who set out to take the exams never made it back. It all just seemed unnecessarily deadly.
My time has come,
Shen Jin said, putting on an arrogant look.
to get your ass kicked?
Chen Haoren asked.
To win, you bastard!
Xie Jin harumphed.
I've yet to see you win once,
Chen Haoren replied.
I'm starting to think beating Lan Jia was a fluke, too. That's it, though,
Xie Jin excitedly said.
Lan Jia can pass the exam for sure, and since I beat her once, I just need to beat her again and take her place. If it's that simple, then maybe I should join the exam, too,
Chen Haoren mused.
Don't even joke about that, young Master Chen.
Song Yuelin interrupted with uncharacteristic seriousness.
I was kidding. I'm not interested in government work.
Chen Haoren laughed. He filed away Song Yuelin's reaction in the back of his mind. Speaking
of Lan Jia, I don't see the Lan family anywhere. I'm sure they are around,
Lan Fen said. She frowned and looked at the pavilion.
There seems to be a situation.
Chen Haoren could feel the agitated energy of the crowd as they arrived at the pavilion. A single guard, clad in heavy metal armor, blocked the steps leading into the structure. He held a long spear in one hand and in the other a scroll. Chen Haoren stretched out his sense. Ninth layer.
He serves under the city lord,
Lan Fen informed him. Her brows furrowed in thought. Before the standoff could develop any further, the guard unfurled the scroll and cleared his throat. By decree of the city lord, all participants in the palace exams are to turn back. He raised the scroll high and presented it to the cultivators of Clear Spring cities as if it were a warding talisman. Hear the decree and turn back. End chapter 44. Farewell, Itsadai. I hope your friend Pumpkin is okay. Oh, you think they could have just sent a note before they left that the exam was cancelled? Is that what he said? No, he said to turn back. I guess they aren't cancelled. Well, they should have sent a note all the same. They could have stayed home and taken a nap. This old bear needs a nap. One moment, please, while I clear my throat. Chapter 44. This young master turned back.
Who are you to turn us back?
Growled a bushy-haired elder. Chen Haoren silently thanked the man for asking the question on his own. Others chimed in with outraged disbelief. Xie Jin rushed up to add his own. Song Yuelin and Lan Fan were calmer about it, but from the way they were furrowed their brows, he could tell they were just as confused. Turn back, repeated the guard. His voice was monotonous, but Chen Haoren could see him starting to sweat. His ninth layer chi cultivation put him well within the upper echelons of power within Clear Spring City, but the pressure put out by an angry crowd of cultivators could cow anyone, especially with the liquid meridian realms present. The bushy-haired elder angrily closed in on the guard.
We are here so that our juniors may participate in the palace exams. Just what does your lord mean by interfering? His chi rose, and Chen Haoren felt the familiar weight of the higher realm once again, though the poor guard was getting the brunt of it. The guard's shoulders shook, but he admirably kept his voice steady. If you have any questions, then you may present them at the City Lord's manor.
Do you think we would run like dogs to him just because of a single guard?
The elder demanded.
I would like to see what the exam official has to say about this deliberate sabotage.
The exam official is at the City Lord's manor, the guard reported. The elder hadn't been expecting that, and looked at the guard in surprise. Nobody else had either, going by the murmuring, whispering other seniors were exchanging. Turn back, please, the guard said a final time. This is ridiculous, Jin groaned. What's going on? Chen Haoren turned to Song Yue Lin. Is this some kind of test?
No,
Song Yue Lin frowned.
they would have separated the participants from their escorts if that were the case. Doing it this way risks offending too many of the local elites.
Maybe they're just a dick? Chen Haoren reasoned.
Nobody is that petty.
Chen Haoren stared.
What?
Song Yuelin asked, nonplussed.
I'm not petty.
Chen Haoren was about to argue the point with him when they were interrupted.
It seems you seem to be in good health, Lan Fen.
An elder approached in front of Lan Fen, white of hair and beard. Chen Haoren almost mistook his coloring to come from age, were it not for the three other heads of white hair behind him. Two of them were even familiar, Lan Yao and Lan Jia. Hello, great uncle, Lan Fen neutrally responded. Her eyes narrowed to slits when she saw Lan Yao, and a small superior smile crossed her face. Lan Yao looked infuriated. Chen Haoren frowned and stretched out his sense toward the Lan elder. He had been around enough powerful cultivators lately that he was not burned when he did so, for the man was a proper liquid meridian realm. Lan Fen's great uncle looked at him as well, briefly furrowing his brow when he saw Song Yue Lin, before returning his gaze to Lan Fen.
I must say I'm surprised you recovered. I was led to believe your condition was permanent.
I was simply fortunate,
I would like to hear more of it back at the estate then.
the Lan elder said.
Perhaps over some tea.
I'm afraid we will have to do that another time, great uncle.
We do have quite the trip back from the mountains ahead of us, he smiled. More than enough time to reconsider.
Chen Haoren froze as he processed the words. There was plenty of wilderness between here and the city for the Lan family to ambush them. Thankfully, they had Song Yue Lin. Song Yue Lin noticed his gaze and smiled. He motioned his eyes toward the Lan elder, winked, and mouthed out two words. Not deal. Chen Haoren paled. Song Yue Lin nodded. He had made a mistake. The deal with Song Yue Lin was only to make sure the Earth Ring techniques stayed as Chen family property. Unless the Lion Elder tried interrogating him for it, Song Yue Lin wouldn't make a move. He probably wouldn't even if the Lion Elder killed them all right now. His thoughts raced. They were still okay for as long as they were for so long as Lan Fen's great uncle was wary of Song Yue Lin. As soon as he tried fighting, though, they'd be exposed. He looked around. They couldn't leave alone.
Is this the time to pursue personal grievances, Lan Shishan?
Interrupted the bushy-haired elder.
There's always time for you to not get involved in my personal grievances, Yan Chi.
The Lan elder, Lan Shi Shen, snorted.
Not when we have more pressing matters first,
Yan Shi said. He waved behind him to the other cultivators.
We will all be going to the city lord to seek answers for this ridiculous charade. And I will join you. I too desire answers.
We will all go, Yan Shi repeated with deliberate emphasis. Lan Shen frowned and looked behind him to the other cultivators who were patiently watching. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and turned around. Lan Yao gave Lan Fen a poisonous look as they left. Thank you, Senior Yan, Lan Fen said, clasping her hands in a bow.
I am only looking at the greater picture,
Yan Shi blandly replied before he too left. Chen Haoren let out a sigh of relief. He didn't fully understand why Yan Shi had helped them, but it probably had to do with politics. They were the ones to expose the Lan family's secrets. He probably wanted to keep them around as a thorn in the Lan family's side for the time being. Chen Haoren couldn't help but think his last words were a warning, though. They didn't say much else as they joined the group while Yan Qi and the other Liquid Meridian realms organized the journey back to Clear Spring City. The Lan family thankfully left them alone and placed themselves on the opposite side of the group. Along the way, they absorbed other groups of examinees and ballooned to over 200 in size. As they approached Clear Spring City and marched through its gates, the elder barked orders at the younger generations to peel off and inform the families what had happened. The streets quickly cleared as people, both cultivators and civilians, made way to avoid the small army on its way to the city lord's palace. Isn't this pretty dangerous? Chen Haoren asked aloud as they reached the palace. A squarish built thing, made solidly out of large stones and painted bright red. The building reminded him of his manor, except grander design-wise. There was a significant number of interests involved here about to enter the seat of the local government. If tensions ran over, what was the guarantee it wouldn't devolve into fighting?
I, for one, am interested in seeing what the city lord is planning,
Song Yuelin said. Of course he would be. If the city lord was acting strange, then the Chen family would want to be the first to know. At least with his status as a hostage, he could count on being kept safe. Whatever was going on this time should be some kind of spat between the city lord and the major families. The guards immediately made way upon seeing them and passed up under the entrance gate, wide enough to allow them all through at once and still have space left on either side. Right as they entered the entrance hall, Lan Fen hunched her shoulders. Her golden eyes narrowed into an intense glare, her previous calm confusion transforming into sharp wariness. Husband, Lan Fen whispered, reaching out her hand. Chills crawled down his spine. He grabbed her hand in a white-knuckle grip and stood shoulder to shoulder with her. Song Yuelin and Xie Jin looked at them in confusion. Chen Haoren flicked his eyes to every corner and curtain and past every guard and servant. It was a futile effort. Whatever could panic Lan Fen to this extent would be beyond his ability to discover. The palace entrance hall opened up into a public court, at the head of which sat a long table and an ornate throne perched on a dais, from which the city lord would conduct government business and hear petitions. The city lord stood to the left of the throne. To the right was a tall woman dressed in a robe the color of bloody crimson. A dragon embroidered with silver-white thread wrapped around the robe with its head stopping at her shoulder, its one clawed arm stretched up to her neck as if to grasp it. Both dispassionately watched the Liquid Meridian realms line up in front.
She should be the exam's official,
Song Yuelin whispered.
Crystal Transformation Realm.
Yan Qi, the selected spokesman, regally stepped forward and bowed toward the exam official first, and then much more shallowly to the city lord.
As loyal citizens of the Empire, we presented our juniors to the testing of the palace exam so that they may serve as righteous officials, he bellowed. City Lord, a guard dispatched from this palace and bearing your symbol has interfered with our participation and is a clear violation of the law. We ask for an explanation. May the exam official provide us justice.
Yan Qi bowed once again at the end of his speech, and the other elders bowed and echoed him. The city lord and the exam official remained silent. Chen Haoren's unease grew. The elders waited and did not speak. Why was the city lord not sitting in his throne? Loud footsteps echoed from behind the dais. Doors leading deeper into the palace were pushed open, and a young man entered the hall. Song Yuelin immediately pulled Chen Haoren behind him, his jovial smile replaced with stone-like seriousness. Chen Haoren watched Yan Qi and Lan Xishen pale as if they had seen a ghost. Ghost was a good way to describe the man who entered. He looked as if someone took a member of the Land family and washed them out even further. His skin paler than snow, with bone-white hair to match. His crimson robe equal to the one the exam official wore, save that his dragon had 4 claws instead, only served to highlight his lack of color. Except for his eyes. 2 bloody irises, a deeper red than his robe, seemed to burn out at them from his skull. The young man nonchalantly sat upon the throne. The city lord puffed his chest and, pitching his voice with chi in a thunderous proclamation that beat in Chen Howard's chest, roared, "Presenting His Highness Prince Shen Jianyu!" "Fuck!" Song Yuelin whispered. End of chapter 44. This fellow sounds quite flamboyant. I wonder if he's nice. Let me get a sip of water. I hope everyone in chat is having a lovely time. Chapter 45. This young master meets a peacock. The bluster of the elders was strangled, and they scrambled to be the first to bow after Shen Jianyu's appearance. Lan Fen dragged him to bow so low he couldn't even raise his eyes to see the prince. The rest of the crowd quickly followed suit. Praises and hails rang through the air, and he trembled beneath the weight of them. Chen Haoren's mind raced seeing Song Yuelin's reaction. He hadn't been this worried even when the city lord was threatening to kill him. Lan Fen panicked before entering the palace, and then a prince of the empire appeared. Song Yuelin panicked. The prince being here was bad for them. Why? Was it because of the deal the Chen family had made with the city lord? They had hidden it from the various forces in the city. Were they hiding it from the empire too? Was it something the empire shouldn't know, period? "You may rise," Shen Jianyu said. He did not pitch his words with chi. It didn't matter. Every cultivator here would strain their ears not to miss a word. "You must be wondering why you were told to come here." He smiled. Chen Haoren heard more than one breath hitch. "I was in the area and heard it was playing host to a palace exam." He nodded to the exam official. I'm sorry, I don't like how I read that. Give me a moment. "You may rise," Shen Jianyu said. He did not pitch his voice with chi. It did not matter. Every cultivator here would strain their ears not to miss a word. "You must be wondering why you were told to come here." He smiled. Chen Haoren heard more than one breath hitch. "I was in the area and heard it was playing host to a palace exam." He nodded to the exam official. Was he really here for the exams? Were there going to be some additional tests added? What was so special about them that royalty would get involved? "I heard the exam was rather important to the people here," Shen Jianyu continued. "So I cancelled them." What? A wave pressed through the crowd, the sheer disbelief almost manifesting into something physical. Lan Xishen shuddered. Lan Yao widened her eyes. Lan Fen pressed her lips into a tight line. Song Yuelin was carefully blank-faced. Xie Jin openly gaped. The city lord and exam officials seemed just as surprised as they were. "You're welcome," Shen Jianyu said. "Your Highness, I must protest," the exam official said. "This is unprecedented." "What is so unprecedented about me using my royal authority to decide on matters established by royal authority?" "This is an overreach, Your Highness." "Send a memorial to the court, then. Let me know when you find someone who cares." The exam official's face pinched into something ugly, but she ultimately stood down. Shen Jianyu looked down to the gathered elite of Clear Spring City with boredom. It seemed to dawn that he was serious. The exam would indeed be cancelled. Is this it? Shen John Yu asked the city lord.
This should be the majority of the participants, Your Highness.
The city lord bowed and answered.
Perhaps I am doing the peerless school a favor, then. I cancelled the exams because everyone was trash. That should be a good enough excuse, don't you think?
The city lord bowed even lower.
As you say.
Had the prince really cancelled the exams on a whim? Just to be a dick? Shen Jianyu chuckled. Are you annoyed with me?
Never!
The city lord squawked. This exam would have been good for your record, though. I would hate to mar your sterling reputation. Shen Jianyu snapped his fingers. It would waste too much time to send them back to the exam site. How about we hold the exam here instead? The city lord paled.
There is no need, Your Highness. None here are fit for the palace school. It's only by the Empire's grace that they are allowed to chance at all.
We'll do as you say, then, Shen Jianyu said. Their conversation didn't go over well. Chen Haoren could see Lan Xishen grit his teeth. The other elders didn't look better. The youth were even worse. He saw more than a few veins popping as they held in their anger. It was understandable. Their opportunity for advancement was stolen from them, and they were forced to stand and listen to their rulers insult them. They remained silent, however. They all did. This was the power of the Empire, that just a single prince could change the fate of Clear Spring City on a whim. This wasn't going to do the city lord any favors, however. The situation in the city was already delicate, and Shen Jianyu would not stay here forever. The people would remember the city lord's words and would take them back to their families. Perhaps that was the prince's intention, to drive a wedge between the city lord and the major powers of the city.
One moment. How do I do this? Hmm. I'm sorry, I'm fiddling with something in the panel. It's not working very well. Oh well, I'll worry about it later. Where was I? Chen Howard grabbed Lan Fen's hand tighter. This didn't bode well for him if the prince was really here for the city lord. If the Chen family's deal with him was exposed, then Chen Howard would be the first to suffer the consequences. All right, Shen Jianyu sighed. This has been rather boring. He casually waved them away. You all may leave. If you have any complaints, then send a memorial to the palace. They bowed once more to the prince and turned on their heels. The anger that had carried them into the city had been punctured, and they left deflated and defeated. Song Yue-lin dragged Chen Haran and Lan Fen away as soon as they exited the palace. Xie Jin hesitated whether to follow them or not, but a single glare from Song Yue-lin rooted him in place. Chen Haoren looked at him apologetically, but couldn't say any more in the face of Song Yue-lin's urgency. Who was that? Chen Haoren demanded as they sped through the streets.
Shen Jianyu, 13th Prince of the Empire,
Song Yue-lin tightly replied.
a dangerous and insane bastard.
Is that bad for us? Is he here for us?
I don't know,
Song Yue-lin snapped. He grabbed Chen Haoren and Lan Fan's wrists and ducked into an alley. Liquid shadow bubbled out from his sleeves and draped over them like a cloak. Chen Haoren had no time to adjust to the sudden blindness when Song Yue-lin suddenly accelerated. He could only liken the experience to being whipped around on a roller coaster through a dark tunnel. He couldn't tell if his feet were planted on the ground or if Song Yue-lin was dragging him through the air like some sort of trailing flag. The shadows cloaking him blocked the wind force of the no doubt ludicrous speed Song Yuelin was going at, just as it blocked sight, feeling, or any sense of being anywhere. The only things Chen Howard could feel were his thoughts and the yellow chi coursing through him. Chi and mind. In Song Yuelin's shadow, he was just a skeleton of meridians and the shaking mind within it, waiting for the darkness to recede so he could put his skin back on again. He felt sick. The shadows receded, and Chen Howard was a man again. His knees gave out, and the sudden halt of motion combined with the blinding assault of light stunned him. He reached for his chi to clear away the pains, but his stomach roiled and he bent over and vomited. He blinked away the tears in his eyes as his senses returned to him and spit out the sour in his stinging throat before sitting up. They were in an alley. One of the city gates was in view outside of its entrance. It was the same gate Chen Howard used for all his trips into the Clear Springs Mountains. Song Yue Lin and Lan Fen stood before him. Lan Fen looked defiant despite being just as unprepared as he was, and a bitter part of his mind was not surprised.
I apologize for the discomfort, young Master Chen, but the situation called for it,
Song Yue Lin said. He reached out a hand, but Chen Haoren slapped it away and shakily rose by himself. What situation? Chen Haoren hissed. You haven't explained anything. You don't even know what's going on.
Whatever the reason for Shen Jianyu to appear here is, it won't be good for us if we catch his attention,
Song Yuelin patiently explained. If he were here for us, he would have done something when we were in the City Lord's palace, Chen Haoren retorted. He's probably here for the City Lord. You saw how he was fucking with the guy.
Yes,
Song Yuelin agreed.
And how much confidence do you have in the City Lord that he won't expose us if pressed?
He's a crystal, Chen Haoren began, but his words died as the realization came over him. Nothing that had been said about the City Lord painted him as reliable. Shouldn't I be the one asking you that? Would the Chen family really make a deal with such a flaky bastard? Song Yuelin was grim.
An imperial prince personally appearing in the region was beyond our expectations,
he sighed.
We may yet be safe, but it's better to be cautious and lay low for the time being.
Chen Haoren frowned and looked at the gates. Why did you not bring us to the manor?
We'll be leaving Clear Spring City until the situation either blows over or blows up,
Song Yuelin answered. A harsh screeching filled the air, and they looked over at Lan Fen, dragging her nails across the alley wall and leaving long white marks in the brick. She folded her arms and looked at Song Yuelin calmly. When did I agree to leave with you? End chapter 45. Well, that prince seems rather rude. I certainly wouldn't listen to his commands, but then I didn't vote for him. They have no one but themselves to blame. Don't pick leaders that you don't like. Chapter 46. This young master leaves the city.
This is no time for quibbling, Lady Fen,
Song Yuelin frowned.
I am saying this for your benefit.
Your good intentions run counter to my goals, Manager Song, Lan Fen replied. Song Yuelin scoffed.
Need I remind you that you are young Master Chen's legal wife? Any issue that affects the Chen family affects you in turn.
A stormy look appeared on Lan Fen's face. You overestimate my connection and underestimate my means to avoid detection. I will not be leaving the city. Okay, stop. Chen Haoren stepped between them and held out his hands. He turned to Song Yuelin. Is leaving the city really our only option?
We don't have the means to properly hide within the city if our identities are exposed,
Song Yuelin said.
Putting as much distance between ourselves and Shen Jianyu is the safest option.
It was a reasonable plan, and Chen Haoren certainly agreed with it, at least in principle. The issue was being that being alone with Song Yuelin in the wilderness for an extended period was the last thing he wanted to do. He couldn't convince Lan Fen to leave, though. With her sensing and pocket space, she was the best equipped to hide and evade attention. It was a waste for her to camp out in the mountains. Not that they could let Song Yuelin know that. How about we split up? Lan Fen and I will.
Impossible,
Song Yuelin immediately struck the idea down. Chen Haoren clicked his tongue in annoyance.
Don't accommodate her, young Master Chen. It was the Chen family she married into, and it is the Chen family she will obey.
He frowned. This was taking it too far. It was only a temporary arrangement that we both agreed on. Don't be a dick.
Were you thinking about that when you taught her the canyon carving sword?
Song Yuelin sharply asked. Chen Haoren was startled. What does that have to do with this?
You gave the technique over to the Chen family. Naturally, that only ones allowed to use it are those connected to the family.
Just for that reason? Chen Haoren said, dumbfounded. You saw me write that annulment paper. You stamped your seal on it. Why are you only saying this now?
It is my duty,
Song Yuelin grimly answered.
I assisted you because I didn't believe you would use it.
You fucker! Lan Fen placed a hand on his shoulder and pulled him back. Do not mind it, she said, glaring daggers at Song Yuelin. I expected this when you originally came to me with the idea. Why didn't you say anything then? He demanded. Why didn't you say anything? His words petered out. Pieces clicked in his head. He locked eyes with Lan Fen. Burning gold looked back at him. Is that why you haven't turned in the annulment papers? Chen Haoren whispered. Whatever Lan Fen saw in his face must have been something to behold because she looked away first. Lan Fen never looked away. I had some hope, he said. He could scarcely hear his voice. Every day you didn't turn in the letter, I had a little more. That they had bonded over the circumstances, that there was something shared between them, that their sham of a marriage had chanced to be something other than fake. Chen Haoren, he held up a hand and rubbed his eyes. Is there any more I need to do, Lan Fen? The Lan family's destruction is assured now, she said, her lips set in a thin line. I will handle the rest. Okay, he quietly replied. He turned to his other problem. Song Yuelin, we're leaving, he commanded. Song Yuelin raised an eyebrow.
I have not heard a satisfactory reason to leave Lady Fen here.
Here's your reason, Chen Haoren said, raising his palm towards Song Yuelin. I can't hurt you, but I swear if you test me one more time, the next thing I do will alert every powerful cultivator in the city.
A bluff only works on those who don't know you any better, young Master Chen.
I'm sure you know a whole lot, Chen Haoren bitterly laughed. Song Yuelin studied him, and for a moment he thought he would finally drop his charade. Instead, his loyal servant sighed.
Fine, do as you wish.
Let's go then. He brushed past Lan Fen and stepped out of the alley with Song Yuelin in tow. Chen Haoren, Lan Fen called after him. She clasped her hands and dipped into a low bow. Thank you. I will never forget what you have done for me. Make sure you turn in those annulment papers, he tiredly said. Song Yuelin placed a hand on his shoulder and darkness covered him. When Song Yuelin released him from his shadow, they were both well into the Clear Springs Mountains. Thankfully, Chen Haoren managed to keep both his feet and his stomach this time. Song Yuelin silently observed him get his bearings. Chen Haoren silently ignored him. They silently stood there until Song Yuelin turned around and shot off deeper into the mountains. Chen Haoren cycled Qi to his legs and followed him. Song Yuelin set a brutal pace through the trees. Much like he did on the way to the palace exams, he scared away any monster in the way with short bursts of Qi. Those too slow in getting out of the way were slapped away without him breaking stride. The scenery around him twigged Chen Haoren as familiar. It wasn't until they broke into an unnaturally familiar circular clearing dominated by a single large tree and the skeleton of an even larger snake that he realized why. He slowed for just a moment in recognition of his first real victory.
Don't fall behind,
Song Yuelin called over his shoulder. Chen Haoren gritted his teeth and doubled his efforts, coming up just up to Song Yuelin's side. Where are we even going? Song Yuelin didn't look at him. He was intently staring at a rectangular block of green jade in his hand. Golden words, much like those he could see through the gifting power, flashed and disappeared across it too fast for him to see.
The port. We can monitor the situation from there and, if need be, quickly leave the territory.
Port? He racked his memories. Let alone ports that weren't even any other. Let alone ports, there weren't even any other cities beyond Clear Spring City. They were going in the wrong direction for that. Did Song Yue Lin plan to double back? It took 2 days of traveling for Chen Haoren to admit he was wrong. It took 2 days of traveling for Chen Haoren to admit he was wrong. Song Yue Lin really wanted them to go through the mountains. He knew that the ocean was on the other side, but there was no port in Clear Spring City's territory that he knew of. What about one that he didn't? A port where the map said there were no ports, where they could keep tabs on the city and safely escape. A port that Song Yue Lin knew about. A Chen family port. Was that their deal with the city lord? The coastline was also technically his territory. Did they come to him to establish a secret port? It sounded illegal, but it didn't explain why Song Yue Lin was so panicked seeing Shen Jianyu. He couldn't even guess. He knew too little about the Chen family to come up with anything reasonable. It was sunset on the third day that Song Yue Lin slowed down from blisteringly fast to somewhat speedy.
Young Master Chen, I know that you are not in the best of moods, but not speaking to me for 2 whole days is a bit much.
Whose fault, he gasped, is that? Song Yue Lin abruptly slowed down into a walk, and Chen Haoren dug his heels into the earth and skidded to a stop in front of him. What now?
I simply wish to talk,
Song Yue Lin said, walking past him. Is there anything to say?
I understand you and Lady Fen were close, but that's no excuse for your behavior, young Master Chen.
I don't need to justify myself to you.
I know that it's been years since you've returned, but I advise you not to bring that attitude back to the family.
Chen Haoren snorted. Of course, going to the Chen family was exactly what he wanted to do. He would rather take his chances in Clear Spring City if that were the case. He had no illusions about his odds of escaping Song Yue Lin, however. If the Chen family wanted him returned, then it was only a matter of which not Song Yue Lin tied him in. Has the family ordered you to bring me back, then? He asked, sneering.
Not quite, although I expect it to come soon. The city lord drawing a prince's attention doesn't bode well for our future operations in the region.
Chen Haoren watched the sun dip under the horizon. It felt remarkably appropriate right now. Tell it to me straight, he said, avoiding looking at Song Yue Lin. Will I be going as the young master, or will I be going in chains?
What are you saying?
Chen Haoren clenched his fist and whirled around. Song Yue Lin was frowning. Chen Haoren felt annoyance well up in him. You can at least tell me this, or are you the same as Lan Fen? Did whatever bond we have only go so far?
Young Master Chen, I'm not sure what you mean. Of course you wouldn't return to the family in chains. Why would you think that?
Are you really asking that? Chen Haoren laughed, the sheer gall of the man overwhelming him. You, he spat. My father sends an assassin to investigate me, and you ask me why I think going back will end poorly for me. Song Yue Lin held out his hands placatingly.
There seems to be a misunderstanding, young Master Chen.
And what would that be? He ground out. The fact that the Chen family has been investigating me is obvious.
Your family isn't investigating you, for starters.
End chapter 46. They aren't? That's surprising. I'd want to know where he's getting all that money, and I would certainly send someone important to investigate. Hmm. Chapter 47. This young master makes a break. Chen Haoren thought he had heard wrong. What did you say?
There is no investigation,
Song Yue Lin repeated. You expect me to believe that? He laughed. Inside, though, he was feeling sick with emotion. All the stress and negativity was building it up into an angry core that Chen Haoren struggled to keep down.
I understand why you would think so, but it is the truth, young Master Chen.
Manager Lin reported me to the Chen family, Chen Haoren said, shaking his head. I know he did. It's why you came here. It's why you were so obsessed with staying by my side.
Manager Lin did send a report,
Song Yue Lin said, nodding.
I was the only one who read it.
The ball of feelings that had been building up in Chen Haoren sputtered and fizzled out. What?
I was the only one who saw the report.
Are you telling me this whole time the Chen family has had no idea what's been going on?
That is correct.
Chen Haoren took a step back, then another. What are you doing here?
As I told the city lord, I came here of my own accord.
Am I supposed to believe that from my father's personal assassin?
Even dogs are allowed to rest, young Master Chen.
You're avoiding the question. He took another step back.
Song Yuelin sighed.
What is there to avoid? I came here on a whim because I thought you were doing something interesting.
He humorlessly smiled.
And I was right.
A storm whirled in his mind. Was Song Yuelin here for the source of his changes? Did he desire it? He hadn't been wanted to be alone with Song Yuelin, but he didn't think he'd be so quick to turn on him. Chen Haoren stepped back again and breathed. His paranoia was threatening to overwhelm him. He'd already made so many misjudgments because of ignorance, he couldn't rush into another because of panic. Song Yuelin was still not telling him everything, that much could be seen. He doubted he would get a straight answer out of the man. Did he want one, though? What would he do with it? What would change? Nothing. The thought sprung like clear water through his murky mind. Nothing would change. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. He looked all around the mountains. Were they always this big? The air was damp, the foliage around them a lush green. High above them, obscured by a blanket of clouds, were towering peaks. His eyes pricked, sweet bird song and the distant roar of beasts filled the air. Underneath it all was a low, constant rumbling.
Did you have fun? Did you have fun?
Chen Haoren asked.
Excuse me?
He smiled.
Fucking around with me. I asked if you enjoyed it.
Young Master Chen.
Chen Haoren spun on his foot and raced off. Song Yuelin was by his side in an instant.
Why are you running, young Master Chen?
Because fuck you, that's why.
Oh. He cycled Qi to his legs and accelerated faster when he had been following Song Yuelin. The forest around him was a blur of green. He focused on his Qi and sped it to the limits his meridians would allow. Song Yuelin crossed his arms behind his back and effortlessly matched Chen Haoren's top speed, looking as if he were taking an idle stroll instead.
You know you can't outrun me, young Master Chen. Let's just talk.
Now you want to talk,
he huffed. He didn't stop running. Now, when he had finally had enough of this bullshit, as if he would actually feel safe if they started talking now. As if it would be enough to trust Song Yuelin after all of this.
It will be more effective than whatever this is,
Song Yuelin said, as if he was the reasonable one in this situation.
I hated myself for thinking you were my friend.
What?
Song Yuelin faltered, and Chen Haoren pulled ahead for a brief moment until he recovered and quickly caught up.
Surprised?
Chen Haoren viciously smiled.
You really almost had me, even with all the stress you put me through.
Even when he thought the Chen family would find out he was a fake and drop the hammer on him, he thought kindly of Song Yuelin. The Qi pool, the training, the jokes. Even now, when Shen Jianyu appeared in the city, he was becoming friends with the men who would kill him. Except he wasn't, because Song Yuelin had apparently come here just to screw around. The rumbling in the distance grew louder. Everything had changed since Song Yuelin appeared. If it weren't for him, he would have never gotten involved in Lan Fen's revenge. She had a plan to deal with her family. All he had to do was sit back and watch her do her work. He didn't need to fight or expose himself, but with the threat of Song Yuelin represented, he needed the guarantee of her safety if her pocket space provided. He wanted his peace of mind back. He wanted to take back all the stress and worry, the looking over his back and the second guessing. He wanted to take back exposing himself to the city and the Lan family. He wanted everything he had before Song Yuelin arrived. Something white hot started burning in his chest.
This is all your fault,
he whispered. If he left with Song Yuelin, he couldn't get anything. Chen Haoren broke through the trees and stopped. In front of him was a raging waterfall larger than the skyscrapers of his old life. Its white water thundered down into a deep valley cut in the mountain. He looked over the edge and saw the river plunge into the valley before going out of sight. There was nowhere to go.
Oh, look, a dead end.
Song Yuelin shook his head.
The perils of running forward blindly.
Chen Howard madly grinned. I, for one, think Lady Luck is smiling at me.
Will you cease this childishness now? I understand you are angry, but I am willing to sit and discuss it with you.
You make that sound like a privilege you're giving me, Chen Howard snorted.
There aren't many who would give you this much face, young Master Chen.
Let's talk then. Chen Howard reached into his storage bag and brushed his hand against smooth, cold metal. A pulse of chi left his fingers and sank into it. When Chen Howard pulled his hand out of the storage bag, it was followed by multiple gray-blue metal pieces floating under a strange power. He waved his hand and the metal wrapped around him, unerringly fitting together and locking into place. The helmet was last, opening up like a flower in bloom and closing around his head seamlessly.
I've never seen you use that before,
Song Yuelin said. I bought it before I met you, Chen Howard replied, clenching his hands and testing the feel of the winter steel essence plate armor. It fit snugly and surrounded him in a pleasantly cool sensation. He had only played around with it once after he purchased it from the auction and never used it again out of fear after Song Yuelin arrived. He stretched his arms and legs and, satisfied with the range of motion, pulled out his sword in one flowing move. Shall we dance? Song Yuelin sighed.
Will you be satisfied after chopping me to pieces?
You think I could? His sword glowed blue.
Then why do you insist on continuing with this farce?
Canyon carving sword. Blue sword energy cut like a river through the air. Liquid shadows spilled from Song Yuelin's sleeve, and the sword energy disappeared into its depths. Would you even be hurt if that hit you? Chen Howard asked, while cycling chi to his legs and rocketing forward.
I would live,
Song Yuelin answered, covering his hand in liquid shadow and batting away Chen Howard's blade.
If you were to reach my level, then you wouldn't have a scratch.
He sidestepped an overhead slash and slapped the side of Chen Howard's helmet.
Did your hardiness come from a spirit herb? I know you came into contact with a powerful one.
His profound rank armor proved its worth and absorbed the stunning blow. He fell with the force and stabbed at Song Yuelin's leg. You even found out about that. He rolled out of the way as Song Yuelin jumped over his sword and brought his leg down where his head used to be, his foot sinking into the earth.
The whole training ground stank of it. I spent the whole night cleaning its traces.
Song Yuelin yanked his foot out of the ground. So that's what you were doing in the outer training ground. That cleared up another mystery at least. He paced backward until he felt the back of his heel hit open air. I thought it would air out on its own.
You can't be careless with resources of that magnitude,
Song Yuelin chided.
Are we done now?
Chen Howren balanced on the edge of the drop. The waterfall rumbled behind him. I don't really want to go anywhere with you. I'm tired of walking on eggshells, and I don't need whatever crap the Chen family will give me.
It won't be that bad, young Master Chen.
Song Yuelin casually approached. I'll fall if you take another step, Chen Howren warned him.
What did I say about bluffing?
Song Yuelin shook his head. Chen Howren tipped over the edge and felt the brief thrill of a free fall. Song Yuelin instantly arrived and grasped at his sword arm, halting his fall. Some of the stuff you've done makes some sense now, Chen Howren mused.
For what it's worth, young Master Chen, I enjoyed our time together as well.
Song Yuelin almost looked sad as he said it. This sucks, Chen Howren sighed.
Are you finished?
Not until I see you squirm.
You shouldn't ask for the impossible, young Master Chen.
Chen Howren madly grinned and placed his hand on Song Yuelin's chest. Everything about me is impossible. Ever since he came to this world, he'd been constantly lacking in both power and knowledge. When it came to money, however, he had more than he knew what to do with. In a space far too small to hold it, bloomed the golden glint of 100 million gold taels. One moment. Apologies, those were the hiccups. And something stuck in my throat.
In a space far too small to hold it bloomed the golden glint of 100 million gold tails. It erupted into existence as if from some invisible geyser. Song Yuelin could scarcely look down in shock before he was swept away in an avalanche of metal. The rush of gold carried Chen Haoren off the edge and down into the river below. Wind whistled in his ears, and he laughed as he fell. His sword glowed blue. Above him, liquid shadow erupted and swept away the rain of tails. Song Yuelin hurled out of its curtain like a diving falcon. Song Yuelin hurtled out of its curtain like a diving falcon. Right into a volleyball-sized brown core that radiated power. The liquid meridian realm bear core that Song Yuelin had given him, improved 100 times over. Song Yuelin's eyes widened. Canyon carving sword. A river of sword energy arced up and split the core. A light flashed and Chen Haoren closed his eyes and braced for impact. The shock wave was hot in his back as he hit the water. Liquid darkness claimed him. End chapter 47. I certainly hope he can swim. This will be a very unsatisfying ending if the last chapter is all gasping and dying, choking on water. Chapter 48. This young master goes spelunking. In the depths of nowhere, a dark river was coursing. Out of those depths emerged an arm that blindly groped against slick cave stone. Eventually a grip was found, and Chen Haoren heaved himself out of the cold waters. He gasped and took in greedy mouthfuls of turbid air. A sharp pain ached in his ribs, and he gently tested his bones, hissing in pain all the while. Not broken, thankfully, but banged up. He had bet on the winter steel essence plate's armor combined with his enhanced durability to survive the fall. He had to ditch the armor, however, lest he drown from being weighed down. The coursing currents had then carried him away and slammed him on what seemed to be every rock on the way down. His sword had been lost in the rush as well. Thankfully, his storage bag was still securely strapped to his waist. He looked around his new surroundings. He wasn't sure where the river had dumped him, whether this was where it led to from above, or if he was somehow swept into another tunnel in the aftermath of the explosion. Gingerly, he stood up and felt around in the darkness. There was room for him to stand, and he felt empty air on either side of him. A cavern, then? If it was this wide, then that hopefully meant that there were other ways out. Otherwise, he would have to take another chance in the river. Either way, he couldn't stay here for long. There was no telling how long it would be before Song Yuelin tracked him down. Jackass he may have been, but Chen Haoren didn't believe for a second his little trap was enough to kill the man. Not like he had intended to kill him. He felt a guilty twinge at the thought as he struck him. He wanted to get away. It was only natural. Whatever Song Yuelin said, whatever his intentions were, he still obeyed the Chen family completely. The fact that he so faithfully acted in their interests, despite ostensibly being here on a whim, was proof of that. Song Yuelin had sealed the deal really when he said he hadn't been reporting to the family. A Chen family that had already heard about Chen Haoren's changes was much different than one that abruptly learned about them when he showed up at their door. Not to mention whatever it was that Song Yuelin wanted out of him. He couldn't risk that, so he risked getting away instead.
Even dogs need rest, young Master Chen.
He quirked his lips in mockery. Perhaps Song Yuelin would understand why he ran off. He, too, needed a rest. With all the grand powers Chen Haoren had both seen and used, it was still the subtle applications of qi that struck him the most. Qi gently cycled through his head and gathered near his nose and ears, sharpening his senses such that he could make his... Why do I keep getting songs with music words in them? Sharpening his senses such that he could make his way through the cavern he found himself in. He picked a direction directly opposite from the river till he reached a wall. Placing a hand on the wall, he followed its length until he grasped nothing but air. He bent down and picked up a loose stone, and with a burst brief spike of chi threw it through the space. He counted the seconds in his head, stopping at 20 when he heard the stone clatter along the ground. He didn't hear it hit a wall. He placed his hands along the wall of this new passage and followed it down, throwing stones every so often to gauge its dimensions. It was only when he rounded a bend that he saw a soft blue light glowing in the distance. He slowed his pace and crept forward. As he came closer to the light, hot, damp air blasted his face, and the wall he was leaning on felt wet to the touch. A cavernous sauna greeted him at the end of the passage. The blue light he had seen was a glowing moss that covered the roof and ground. It illuminated an even larger cavern that Chen Howard couldn't see the end of, even with his chi-enhanced vision. Not helping was the steam wafting through the air that rose from the superheated pools and littered the area. He approached one and dipped a finger in its water. He frowned as he felt the chi contained within it. This had to be one of the Clear Spring Mountains' famous spiritual pools. He looked around and spied hundreds of similar pools just within his field of vision alone. Assuming all the pools here were like this one, then this place was a treasure indeed, which meant danger. As if hearing his thoughts, a body suddenly crashed into the pool in front of him. Chen Howard cursed and jumped back as he was soaked by the hot water. The expected attack never came, however. Instead, floating in the pool was a sloth. It looked like a sloth at least, with its long arms and longer claws. Its back was coated in glowing moss. It burbled at him from the water with its glowing blue tongue and proceeded to doggy paddle around the pool. He stretched out his sense. Chi realm, fourth layer. Shinhauern looked up and saw more sloths. They stretched from stalactite to stalactite and chewed on the glowing moss that grew on them. When they lacked a stalactite to cling to, they sank their claws deep into the stone and crawled along the roof. He shuddered and took a step back from the pool and its swimming sloth. Even if it was a sloth, it was still a cultivating beast. There was no telling if he would suddenly sprint over and split him open. At the same time, he wondered just how a sloth would get underground. Was it chi that let them adapt to the forward environment? Why would they even need to stick to the ceiling anyway? What with so much moss on the ground? The swimming sloth squealed and Chen Haoren ducked as something shot over his head and landed opposite him. A chittering, dog-sized cricket from hell stared at him with its orb-like eyes. It had rubbed its long, spiny legs together in a noise that sounded like rock on a chalkboard. Oh, hell no. The monster cricket flexed its legs and shot toward him, reaching out with spike-covered arms. Chen Haoren held out his hands, and two curved scimitars appeared in them. He planted his feet and slashed at the cricket, splitting it in half down the middle. He quickly hopped back from the gooey corpse in disgust and stretched out his sense. The scimitars were like wind in his hands as he crossed them together and cleaved another ambushing cricket into 3 pieces. He focused his sense and relaxed his guard when he didn't detect anything. He whipped off the bug guts from the blades and admired how light they felt in his hands. The canyon carving sword was meant to be used through a single sword, so he'd never bothered to pull out the paired blades before. The ease with which it carved through the crickets, however, showed how the profound rank weapon really was in a league of its own compared to the mysterious water steel sword. Water splashed behind him, and he whirled around to find another cricket that had tried to attack the sloth in the confusion. Emphasis on tried. The claws that he had seen so easily pierce stone now grabbed through the cricket's head. The sloth was struggling to wrench its claws free while also keeping afloat. While it might be able to free itself, there were equal odds it would drown before it could do so. Shenharan sighed. I'm only helping you because you warned me. He waded into the pool and grabbed one end of the cricket. He carefully tried to grab the sloth's arms and was rewarded by its attempting to swing its other arm over. Easy, you little shit, he warned the squealing sloth. I don't want you to drown. Whether it got the message or not, it stopped struggling for a brief moment. Shenhauern quickly grabbed the sloth's arm and ripped it off the cricket corpse with its flecks of chi before jumping out of reach. Thankfully, the sloth was more content with paddling around the pool than trying to lure it to turn his insides into outsides. Shenhauern watched it splash around and huffed a laugh. Chi can make anything viable, I guess. Giant killer crickets and fast sloths.
Truly, they were monstrosities only this world could create. Above them, the band of sloths called down to their fallen companion. The swimming sloth happily squealed back up at them, then looked at Chen Haoren. He shook his head. I draw the line at helping you get back up there. The sloth cocked its head and squealed at him. Then it floated out of the water. Howren watched in stupefied awe as the sloth defied gravity and flipped upside down before rising all the way back to the cavern roof and wrapping its limbs around a stalactite. He stood there in silence as the band of sloths squealed at each other. Water dripped down from the wet sloth onto his head. What the hell is this place? End chapter 48. Dog-sized crickets. Those sound delicious. Can I have them? I don't think he's going to eat them. He doesn't seem like the cricket-eating type. He seems like the pork-eating type. Though I guess he did become the pork-eating type after killing all those pigs. Maybe after killing enough crickets, he'll become a cricket-eating type. We'll just have to find out. Chapter 49. This young master is a bachelor. The spa cavern, as he had taken to calling this place, had provided no answers as to its nature. All Shenharen knew was that it was very large and very easy to get lost in. This heavy steam from the heated spiritual pools also obscured his vision and his chi sense. It made traversing it much harder, not helped by the fact that so much of the ground was broken up by the numerous pools, of which some, as Chenhauer had been unluckily found out, were quite literally too hot for him to handle. The denizens of the spa cavern weren't making things any easier. The cave sloths were fine. They kept to themselves up on the cavern roof and were more focused on eating moss than bothering him. The crickets, though, were a menace. Their senses were better adapted to this place than his own, and whenever they were in the area, they seemed to unerringly home in on him. They were vicious things, always bent on fighting and devouring, whether that be him and the sloths or their fellow crickets. Once, when they had thankfully ignored him, he watched them target the sloths instead, leaping to the roof and grasping them with powerful legs and arms before dragging the screaming sloths down to be torn to pieces. He hated their raucous chirping the most. At least normal cricket sounds could be considered beautiful. These things, on the other hand, were hell-bent on being an assault on all five senses. The only saving grace was that they were all far weaker than him. He had yet to see one at the fifth layer or higher. He had a feeling that wouldn't last. Despite all this spiritual water around him, he had yet to see a proper aquatic beast. He wasn't looking forward to when he did, because for all that he complained about the cavern, there was one thing that made all his troubles worth it: cultivation. He wasn't sure if it was because of the pools themselves or if the natural chi here was inclined that way, but this place was a haven for a water attribute spiritual root. Every pool he had found was infused with chi in some type of way. That chi-infused water then turned into chi-infused steam. That chi-infused steam was then easily absorbed and leached of its water-aspected energy by Chen Haoren. The place was unlike anywhere he had cultivated before. Even if he could find a way out, it would be a waste not to take advantage of it. He really did need to find an exit, though. Chen Haoren yawned and pushed aside the boulder that sealed the entrance to his temporary home. He had carved out a little hole for himself in the cavern wall with a careful application of the canyon carving sword. Fortunately, he had the foresight to stuff his storage bag with food and camping supplies in the event he had to bug out. Admittedly, he had been preparing with Lan Fen's pocket space in mind, but it served well enough here. He stripped off his sweaty clothes and jumped into a nearby pool. He felt its soothing energies ebb and flow through his body like an ocean tide. He had chosen to make his home here because the heat of the pools were perfectly in the Goldilocks zone. Hot enough to push him, but not so hot that he couldn't handle it. Shenhauern breathed in deeply the chi-infused steam in the air and felt it sit heavily in his lungs. Cycling the Yellow Dragon River refinement, he felt the steam dissipate into energy and soak into his meridians. The yellow dragon danced faster than it had ever done before, as if it had returned to its natural environment. It felt like he had little rivers flowing through his body, being endlessly fed by a deep spring. The energy of the spiritual pool stole away the stress placed on his already enhanced meridians, allowing him to cultivate for far longer than he could before. Shenhauer watched the yellow dragon dance for what felt like hours before the exhaustion began to creep in. With the dancing came the expansion of his chi. He was seeing visible progress at a rate comparable to when he devoured great cultivation supplements by the pound. It was a shame he didn't have any more. He could scarcely imagine how fast he could cultivate in this place with proper resources. Slowly, he came out of his meditative state, the yellow dragon sounding off a final satisfied roar. He opened his eyes and smiled at yet another successful cultivation session. Then a sloth cannonballed from the ceiling into the pool. Shenhauer spat out water and directed an unamused glare at the swimming sloth. "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" The sloth burbled at him happily and paddled around the pool. Perhaps because he had never helped it before, perhaps because he was new and non-threatening. Whatever the case, this sloth had been consistently bothering him ever since. It would have been a nice, movie-worthy bonding of animal and man if the little beast didn't constantly swan dive into whatever pool he was currently occupying. "Go on," he waved. "Shoo!" The sloth ignored him, lost in its own little world. "I don't even like sloths." "So then he's like, I came here on a whim, and he expects me to accept that?" Shenhauer leaned back against the edge of the pool, an arm crossed over his eyes. The other hand ripped off a patch of glowing green moss glowing around the edge of the pool and fed it to the waiting sloth. "He invades my privacy, acts like a prick, investigates everything I do, then wants me to wander off into the wilderness to some secret port, and I'm supposed to follow him?" The sloth grunted, and he fed it another patch of moss. "The worst part is that he's helped me a lot, too, and I just don't know what he wants in exchange for that. Should I have really stuck around and waited till he dropped whatever favor he wanted on me?" The sloth squealed. "That's what I thought," Shenhauer sighed. "Still, this is nice." He sank lower in the pool, away from plots and politics, hidden dangers, and overhanging threats. No Song Yue Lin, no city lord, no prince of the empire. Here he didn't have to be constantly worried about his fraud being exposed and getting a knife in the back for it. It would have been nice if he could have woken up in a place like this, where no one knew who he was and he didn't have to pretend to understand what he didn't. There was a soft skittering of carapace on rock. Shinhauer didn't move as the monster cricket lunged at him. On his ears, two gold earrings set with orange-black tiger eyes shone with dark light. An invisible wave of chi spread out and the cricket froze. In his mind's eye, he could picture what the cricket saw. A giant tiger sitting above Chen Howren's head, preparing to pounce. The tiger roared, the cricket sped off, the sloth lashed him for more moss. "Needy little shit," Chen Howren grunted. He ripped off more moss. There was a sudden feeling of glass shattering. Chen Howren shot up, much to the disgruntlement of the disturbed sloth. He clutched his chest and looked around with wild eyes in search of where that feeling had come from. Eventually his gaze roamed up to the burning words floating in the air. "Everlasting 100 blessings, charitable prosperity." Lan Fen's name had disappeared. He probed the grifting power with his mind in search of her slot. Instead, he found the metaphysical equivalent of an empty space. He sank back down into the pool with a sigh. Lan Fen must have finally turned in the annulment papers. Chen Haren didn't know what he felt in his chest. On the one hand, he was relieved that his guess had been accurate, and marriage was indeed the basis of their connection. He was also happy that breaking the connection hadn't led to any adverse effects on the gifting power. On the other hand, "I'm crazy." He laughed and shook his head. The sloth angrily squealed at him. Shinhauren laughed again. "Guess I'm divorced," he told his sloth friend. That did lead to the problem of finding a new connection, though. He had to choose carefully lest he ran into the same problems he did with Lan Fen. The sloth squealed again. "I don't suppose you want to marry me?" he asked, forking over more moss to appease its anger. Idly, he checked his connection with the beast. Connection negative. He froze. He hadn't expected it to work on an animal. Could there be a chance he could actually form a connection with something not human? His mind raced. Why couldn't it work? It's not like the connection being negative meant it was permanent. He had to just create the right relationship for it to be positive. Lan Fen had been negative before their marriage, after all. Chen Haoren shot out of the water, much to the sloth's displeasure. He pointed his finger. You will become my pet. The sloth squealed at him and floated away. Come back! End chapter 49. Where's that a blank version of that meme that goes something about someone in family doesn't want pet, and then family member with pet, and it shows them enjoying the pet, or them sharing hats, or something like that. I think that applies for this. Oh well. I know that was only 9 chapters, but I'm afraid that my time is running out for now. I hope you all had a pleasant time. Also, I've been asked to inform everyone I see that Digital Vagrant is having some event on Friday on his channel Friday night, with several guests who are all coming together to help him raise money for his medical bills. If you haven't already heard about this, maybe you can check them out Friday night. As for me, I will be back tomorrow with more chapters of Immortality. Starts with Generosity. And maybe we can find out what Chen Haoren is going to do to that poor innocent sloth. Psst. What's a sloth? Anyone? Does anyone know what a sloth is? Whatever. I'm just going to assume it's some kind of rat. Have a pleasant evening, everyone. I'm going to try this raiding thing again, just to see if I can make it work. We're going to raid Min. Anyway, if you are paying attention this evening, I might pop on to play Dave the Diver like I promised for Friday. I've been putting it off too long and I want to at least try the game out. I'll see you all then, or tomorrow, or whenever. Good night.